Hello, welcome to my channel. My name is Amy if you're new here. If you're not new here, thanks so much for coming back. Today we're going to discuss a topic that I have hinted around in some of my other videos, but to be honest, I've been putting it off because it scares me. But we're going to talk today about secondary infertility, primarily secondary infertility with unexplained infertility as the cause. So you guys are gonna have to bear with me because, like I said, this is a topic that I've hemmed and hawed about, and I've wanted to film the video because I do want to share my experience, and I do want to kind of catalog my experience in a video so that I have it to reference back to, but it's a hard topic. So I have taken notes, which I don't usually do for videos, and I always say that I should have taken notes, but I don't. But this time, I feel like I've taken notes. So forgive me if I'm looking down too much, but I'm just trying to kind of hit all the things and kind of keep myself on track so that it doesn't turn into a 45-minute video. Okay, so to start out, what is secondary infertility? We're just gonna kind of go over the basics of what it is, what the diagnosis, you know, just kind of like factual stuff, and then I'll get into my actual story. So the definition of secondary infertility is the inability to become pregnant or carry a child after giving birth to a child. So simply put, that means you have a child at home that you have carried to term, given birth to, is healthy, but now you're unable to become pregnant. So that can look different for a lot of people. I want to say infertility sucks, full stop. Before I go into this next part, it sucks. Not being able to have a child when you so desperately want a child is a hard thing. It's a hard thing to deal with. It's hard to cope with, and it's hard to share about, which I'm going to get into. And I also want to say, I know there are other options, you know, adoption, foster care, all these things. There are other options, but unless you have desired to carry and give birth to a child and can't, I don't feel like you can really explain to somebody who's skeptical of your struggle. You know what I mean? Like, if you haven't gone through it, then it may not make sense to you, and that's okay. It doesn't have to. Just know that people struggle with it, and it's hard for them. So anyway, I just wanted to say that. Infertility sucks, but I feel like secondary infertility adds layers to the issue. You're judged. You're judged because you already have children. I'm in a couple of support groups for secondary infertility, and even in the support groups for secondary infertility, particularly in my case, because I am now pregnant with my 5th child, which this is the one that we struggled to get pregnant with, but I already have 4 children. So there's very much a sense of, well, you already have 1 child, you should be grateful. Well, you already have multiple children, you should be grateful. You know, you don't have it as bad as I do. Even in the infertility community, there is that attitude, and so it's very difficult. And I knew kind of going in, just from reactions, mentioning, you know, like when we tried to get pregnant with our 3rd child, we tried for 6 months, which I know is not a long time. I know it's not. But with our 1st and 2nd, we got pregnant the 1st month of trying. So when we were trying for the 3rd child, it took like 6 months to get pregnant, and then when I did get pregnant, it ended in an early loss. And even then, people were like, well, just be grateful for the 2 that you have. You know, maybe it's just not in God's plan. Maybe it was meant to be. You know, just all this stuff that is completely and utterly unhelpful. So when we decided to start trying for baby number 5, we didn't tell anybody. We didn't tell anybody because we didn't want to hear the comments about, well, you've already got 4 kids, you have no business having a 5th. We didn't want to hear, you know, any of the judgment that comes along with trying to expand your family when you've already got what people deem to be a large family. So that turned into not being able to get pregnant, and then we didn't share because I couldn't bear the thought of, we can't get pregnant, and now people are telling me, well, you know, if it happens, it'll happen. Just relax. Maybe it's not, you know, in the plan, in God's plan, whatever. Those things are hard to hear when you can get pregnant. When you can't, I don't know if I could have dealt with it. You know what I mean? So we just chose not to share. Anyway, I joined online support groups, and what I was saying was that there were, even in these support groups, they're trying to be supportive, but a lot of people that deal with secondary infertility also dealt with primary infertility. So if you are somebody where infertility is a new thing after having kids, like you didn't have to struggle to get pregnant with the first or second or whatever, and then all of a sudden you are, it kind of even puts you into this smaller little subcategory where it's like, okay, we support you, but like you're new to this, you know, don't complain too much until you've been at it for 10 years like I have. And it's a really hard environment to be in because everybody that is in that group is in pain and they are struggling. So you want to give them grace, but you want to be able to get support too. And it's a fine line to walk. The other thing with secondary infertility that I don't believe you would experience with primary infertility is a feeling of shame. Like shame walking into a doctor's office with your children in tow because you have to have your 21-day progesterone drawn, or the shame of walking into a reproductive endocrinologist's office with your child to, you know, get labs or whatever it is. Like it's when you have children, like I have 4 children. I'm a stay-at-home mom. They're homeschooled. They had to come with me sometimes. It is what it is. But you still kind of feel like, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. I'm here. I know you don't have any kids, or you only have one and I've got these and I'm so sorry. It's just like, it's a constant struggle because you want to feel like you deserve to have this baby. But on the other hand, there's always the, well, you know, I mean, I do have, it's a whole thing. So anyway, that was me defining secondary infertility. I'm trying not to make this a 4-hour video. So what causes it? We're going to talk about the causes. So secondary infertility can be caused by impaired sperm production or function. That could be due to injury, to illness, to low testosterone, things like that. So that could be an issue. It could be damage to your tubes from various issues. Ovulation disorders, endometriosis, things like that can cause fertility issues to develop where they didn't exist before. Complications from a prior pregnancy or surgery, if you've got scarring that's preventing the normal function of ovulation and then fertilization and then implantation. Anything that inhibits that cycle anywhere can cause secondary infertility, and then changing risk factors for you or your partner. You know, age, lifestyle, weight, medications that you may be taking, illnesses that may have occurred since your last pregnancy. These are all things that can cause it. So when you go to a doctor, the typical recommendation is if you're under 35 years old, try for a year. If you don't get pregnant, go to a doctor. If you're over 35, wait 6 months and go to a doctor. So that's kind of the guideline that they give you, which is hard because it's like wait, and there's a whole lot of waiting in the infertility game. It's like, well, let's just wait. Well, let's try this and we'll wait and we'll see. And then we'll wait and see, and then we'll wait some more. And it's hard to wait. So those are the main causes of secondary infertility. Now, unexplained infertility is when they can't find a problem with the sperm, they can't find a problem with the hormones, they can't find a problem with the structure, they can't find a problem with the ovulation, everything seems to be working fine, you're just not getting pregnant. That's what I have. That adds, I feel like, kind of another complication to it, because not only can I not get pregnant, but nobody can tell me why I can't get pregnant. On paper, I should be pregnant already. So it's very emotional. It's a hard thing to go through, and I know I keep saying this and I'm kind of rambling and I'm trying not to, but so those are the potential causes. I'm going to talk really quickly then about diagnosis, the different things that they can do to try and figure out what the causes are or pinpoint your cause, and then treatments for it. And then after that, I'm going to run through our personal story. So the diagnosis process for secondary infertility for men would be very similar to what it is for primary infertility. There's a couple of steps that they'll take and different procedures that they can perform to kind of evaluate if it's male factor infertility that's involved. So for men, the options for diagnosis would include a semen analysis, hormone testing, genetic testing, if you know that's been an issue, or if you have a new partner, maybe you have children from a previous relationship and you've since remarried, and that's when the struggle started. They can do genetic testing. They can do imaging of like the testicles and other sex organs or parts in that area just to make sure that structurally everything's okay, that there's no damage, and then some other more specified testing of sperm, like specifically checking the DNA of the sperm cells themselves. So those are kind of the steps they would go through for a man that is struggling, or for a couple that's struggling on the man's part. Now on the woman's part, the options aren't completely different from a man's, but obviously our bodies are different, so they vary a little bit. So for women, the options would include ovulation testing, which starts with hormone testing, like they'll do a 21-day progesterone draw to check and see that you've ovulated, because if you ovulate, your progesterone should elevate. And then basic structure of, of fertility is that your body ovulates and your progesterone spikes, and if you don't have a fertilized embryo that implants, your progesterone drops, and that drop is what causes your cycle to start again. So they will go in on day 21, which is approximately 7 days after you ovulate, and they will check that your progesterone is kind of spiked at a peak, and they want it above a certain level, which indicates ovulation. So they can do that. They can do a, I have to like pause to say this, it is a hysterosalpingography, an HSG is what it is. So what they do is they inject contrast dye into your uterus, and then they're taking an x-ray while they're doing this, and they check to make sure that everything passes through properly, that the fluid is spilling out of your fallopian tube so that your tubes are clear, so that you're able, when you are ovulating, the eggs can make it through where they need to. So they just check that structurally everything looks normal and that you don't have any blockages in your tubes. Another option is ovarian reserve testing, which usually starts with a blood test. It's called an AMH test, anti-Müllerian hormone. It's a hormone that indicates kind of to them how many eggs you have in reserve, because as you know, women are born with a specific number of eggs, and that it just declines from birth through fertility, and when you're out of eggs, that's kind of like menopause. So they can test AMH levels to see that you still have an ovarian reserve and that it's not depleted, and that's not the cause of your infertility, because age can play a factor. They do other hormone panels, thyroid, estrogen, progesterone, FSH, TSH, LH, all this other prolactin. They do all of that stuff. They can test those hormone levels to make sure that they're all in balance. Because if your hormones are out of balance, then it affects the whole cycle, because your cycle is hormonally driven. So if one hormone is not sending the signal it needs to, you never get to the next step, and that can cause issues. They can do pelvic ultrasounds and other imagings, like an SHG, which is a sonohysterogram, which is where they will do an ultrasound. It's still a ultrasound, but they fill your uterus up with saline to kind of get a better look than they could if it was empty and not, you know, just doing a regular ultrasound. And then there's other surgical options, which include a hysteroscopy or a laparoscopy, which are both where they take scopes and they will kind of like take a little camera and they will look inside, either inside your uterus or inside your abdominal cavity, to check for any scar tissue, adhesions, endometriosis, things like that, or just fibroids, anything that could be causing issues with the travel of the egg or the implantation. So those are the diagnostic options for men and women. So treatment options. For men, they usually include lifestyle changes, potentially surgical correction if it's needed, medications to balance out hormones or fix the issues that are present, and then sperm retrieval is also an option. If there is just for some reason it's not coming out right, they can surgically go in and extract the sperm without having to go through the ejaculation process, and then they can use that sperm for IUIs or IVF or anything else like that. So, whew, I'm sorry, I'm sweating. I turned my fan down so that it wouldn't be making background noise, and now I'm sweating. So those are the treatment options for men, kind of in a nutshell. For women, the most common treatment for ovulation issues like PCOS or anything like that is ovulation stimulating hormones. So they will give you the medications to stimulate ovulation. It's called stimming in the fertility world. The other option is IUI, with or without medication. You can do a medicated cycle to help induce ovulation and then do an IUI, or sometimes just do an IUI, which is intrauterine insemination, which is where they retrieve the sperm sample from your partner, and then when you're about to ovulate or at the time of ovulation, they would go in with a catheter and inject the sperm directly into your uterus. So it eliminates the whole travel portion. And then obviously surgery to correct any structural issues or blocked tubes, things like that. And then you can move on in the end to what they call ART, or artificial reproductive technology, which includes things like IVF. So those are kind of, that's just like a outline of the steps you would take after you get a diagnosis. Sorry guys, I was sweating too much. I couldn't make it through it. I had to like stop the video and change my clothes. because, you know, pregnancy. Anyway, so those are kind of the basics of what secondary infertility is, the steps to get the diagnosis for your secondary infertility, and then kind of the options to treat it. So that's just kind of an outline, and I'm going to share with you what our path was, just to give you an idea, like the journey that we took and how it kind of played out for us. Now, it can play out differently for anybody or everybody, just depending on, like, you know, what your circumstances are, but this is what it looked like for us. So we decided in January that we were going to start trying to get pregnant. Now, my first 3 pregnancies were planned. We didn't try for any, we tried for 6 months prior to getting pregnant with Jacob, my 3rd child. We had an early loss and then got pregnant the very next cycle that we tried. So we have never had to, like, try very long. And I mean, I'm thankful for that. Our 4th child was actually an unplanned, it just happened. We thought we were, I don't use birth control because I have migraines with aura, and so hormonal birth control can increase risks of different things, and I just don't like the way that it affects my body, so we don't do that. We've used kind of a natural family planning method, and so my 4th child was just a surprise. I technically shouldn't have gotten pregnant at that time. Knowing what I know now, I think I could tell you why I did, but that's a whole other thing. But anyway, so when we started trying for our 5th, we figured it would happen fairly quickly. So we started trying in January. In March, Tim had gone in just for his regular yearly physical. He'd been very tired and not feeling super well, and so his doctor had, in addition to the regular, you know, cholesterol, blood pressure, all that stuff, they checked his hormone levels just to see what was going on. And it turned out that he had low testosterone. So we're thinking, okay, well, we're trying to get pregnant. If that doesn't happen in the next few months, maybe we should see if that's affecting semen quality. So come June, we went in to see my doctor. I still wasn't pregnant. His doctor had wanted to put him on testosterone replacement therapy, but if you are on testosterone replacement therapy, it can suppress sperm production. And that obviously is counterproductive to getting pregnant. So we didn't want to do that. He scheduled an appointment to go see a urologist, and I had seen my doctor and they ordered a semen analysis. So when I went in to see my doctor, we talked about it, and I wasn't quite 35 yet. I was 34 and a half. But we'd been trying for 6 months, and I was like, look, dude, I'm gonna be 35 in 6 months. Can we just do the blood test? And sometimes you kind of have to fight with them because they want to tell you, well, it hasn't been a year, that's normal. But for us, that wasn't normal, and I just kind of felt like something wasn't right. So they did a full blood panel. They did a CBC, FSH, TSH, LH, prolactin, estrogen, like just the full basic panel to check to make sure that my hormones are in balance. And they ordered a semen analysis for Tim. So then fast forward, we get the semen analysis results back, and they are slightly low. They're not like the most terrible thing you've ever seen in your life, but they're not optimal. My labs came back normal. Everything was perfectly within range. The only thing that was slightly off was my TSH, which is my thyroid stimulating hormone. So that was slightly elevated. It was like 5.2. At that time, the parameters for testing within normal range was like 0.5 to 5. So it was slightly above normal range. And my OB said, well, get with your primary care and then talk about getting on some low dose thyroid supplements. So I did. My doctor told me, oh, well, you know, 5 is just barely elevated. We usually see people when they're having symptoms and issues of thyroid disorders come in at like 20. And so, you know, I don't really think we should try, but if you want to, we can. And just very kind of reluctant and hem-hawy about it. So the thing is at the time, like, I was experiencing some symptoms of thyroid disorder. I had gained weight and I wasn't able to lose it. My hair was falling out. I was tired. All of these things. I have a family history of autoimmune disease and thyroid dysfunction. And so I was kind of like, well, I really think that might be an issue. My doctor started me on a very low dose. It didn't seem to help right away. And I had this horrible, horrible migraine that lasted like 10 days. Could not get rid of it with treatment. It was the same time that I'd started the meds. My doctor was like, well, I don't think that's what caused it, but let's just stop the meds, and you know, I don't think you really need them. And so that was the end of that. So my labs all come back normal in June, except for the thyroid. We retested the thyroid. My doctor didn't really want it, my OB didn't want to do anything until we kind of retested and got a better baseline. So we retested my thyroid in September, and it was down to like 3.7. So we're like, well, you know, it can fluctuate. Maybe that was a fluke. We'll see. He agreed to give me Clomid. Now, Tim started doing Clomid a while back. So meanwhile, he had gone to the urologist. He had an ultrasound of his scrotum just to check to make sure that everything was fine. He had a hormone panel to make sure his pituitary function, everything was fine there. So everything looked good, except for that he did have what's called varicocele, which is basically a, oh my gosh, you guys, pregnancy brain. He had a varicocele, which is a varicose vein basically in the scrotum. So what that does is when a varicose vein is an enlarged or bulging vein, essentially he was overheating. So we had the option at the time of doing surgery, which would take about 6 months to show any therapeutic benefit to hormone levels and sperm production, or he could take medication. They give the same medication to men as they do for women for ovulatory issues. It's Clomid, and it can help just with leveling out hormone levels so that everything's working properly. And we elected to take that route because it had the same therapeutic benefit as the surgery at the time. And we just kind of wanted to get past one hurdle at a time. So he did that. His repeat analyses were fantastic. It was working. His testosterone levels were amazing. He felt better. So then we just kind of moved on. In October, we started doing medicated cycles. I started doing medicated ovulation cycles. I did 4 rounds of Clomid, and then I would go in and have my 21-day test done. Everything looked like I was ovulating. It looked like I was ovulating before, but we decided to try the Clomid to no avail. Never got pregnant. So that brought us to January, and my doctor said, well, I don't feel comfortable doing anything further. I'm just an OBGYN. You should go see a reproductive endocrinologist. So I did. I made an appointment, and I got in to see a reproductive endocrinologist at the University Hospital in Oregon, and they did the same draw. They tested my thyroid, they looked at my previous labs, they talked about my history, they tested for TPOA, which is thyroid peroxidase antibody, which indicates an autoimmune disorder with your thyroid. And so then we kind of waited, and we decided that the next step would be an IUI. My results came back. My thyroid was still a little high. It was in parameters. It was in the 3 range, between 3 and 4. So that's within range. It's within normal range. But when you are a healthy woman in reproductive age, they like to see it as close to 1 as possible. My TPOA came back positive for thyroid peroxidase antibodies, which means that I have an autoimmune disorder called Hashimoto's. We found that out at the time, but nobody ever suggested treatment. So we did 2 IUIs, one in June, one in August. Both failed. Or was it July and August? I can't rightly remember right now. But anyway, they both failed. No pregnancies resulted. We then moved across the country from Oregon to North Carolina. Once we arrived in North Carolina, I had heard about a reproductive endocrinology clinic that was based in New York, but they did reproductive procedures very, very inexpensively. So I contacted them and got a consultation. We did blood work, and the doctor said, well, your TSH is a little higher than I want to see it. And I was like, well, imagine that. Everybody's been saying that. He goes, well, I want to start you on a low-dose thyroid hormone. And I was like, okay. And so since everything else was normal, my thyroid was the only thing that was slightly out of whack, and it wasn't even terrible. So my TSH it wasn't terrible, but it was the only thing that kind of indicated that there could be an issue. Now, I went to the clinic, did my preliminary blood work, and then we started medications for a stimulation cycle for egg retrieval, because we had decided that the next step was going to kind of be, since there was no explanation for the infertility, we were going to try a round of IVF, which is in vitro fertilization, where they take the sperm and the egg, put them together, fertilize the embryos, and then transfer a already fertilized embryo back into the uterus. Whew, sorry, my camera's like trying to do its own thing. So after we did the egg retrieval cycle and they had started me on a low-dose thyroid, I kind of knew when I went in for the egg retrieval that my issues were probably thyroid and vitamin related, because my response to the stimulation medication was, we'll say, strong. They retrieved, excuse me, they retrieved 30 eggs, 26 of which were mature. So there's that. After the egg retrieval, I went in to see my regular primary care doctor just for a physical and all that other stuff. And they did, you know, all the normal labs, but he also tested my vitamin D and found that that was low. So we started supplementing that as well. At this point, I was kind of feeling like maybe these were the answers. Maybe if we wait, we'll get pregnant on our own. But we already had embryos. In the end, after the mature ones were fertilized and then they tested them day 5 to 6, and this is going to be a whole nother video, but anyway, we ended up with 10 embryos. So we kind of decided, well, we've already got them, we might as well use those. So we went in July and we had 1 embryo transferred. It took successfully, and I am now 26 weeks pregnant. So that is the route that we took. Now, interestingly, I recently read, after I was already pregnant, a study that was done in Australia, in Perth, that connected a large, excuse me, a large number of women who were undergoing IVF for infertility reasons to be deficient in vitamin D. It's known that thyroid issues can cause fertility stuff. So essentially, the two things that are known factors but can't necessarily, they don't know why your thyroid necessarily affects fertility, and they don't know why vitamin D necessarily would affect fertility. It's not like they can say, well, we know if you don't have enough estrogen, it affects your cycle, things like that. But the two things that are the most believed to be the most common causes of infertility that is unexplained, I had. So, whoo, okay. We're having trouble focusing and my battery's gonna die. So the struggle that we went through just to get a diagnosis and then kind of get treatment, it was hard. It was a long, hard road, and it felt really lonely. We didn't tell anybody until after we were pregnant, for the most part. There were a few people that we had confided in that we were trying and that we shared the journey with. Hey, you know, we're doing this, now we're doing this. But those people were very, very few. I didn't even tell my parents that I was pregnant and that we'd been trying for 2.5 years until I was pregnant. So I hope that this video was informative, that it will help you to maybe get some information, to not feel so alone, encourage you to seek out advice and treatment if you're struggling with the same thing, and just know that you're not alone. It's a hard journey, it is a struggle, and it's one that I wish nobody had to go through. Primary or secondary infertility sucks. It just sucks. And so I just wanted to make this video so that hopefully it could help somebody. And if you have any questions, I will try and answer them the best that I can. I left out a lot of information because this video is already going to be really, really long, but there is a lot more information out there and some resources. Again, thank you so much for watching. If you're interested in our IVF journey and how that went, I do plan to do a more in-depth video on that process and how we started it, what it looked like, and how we got pregnant. But that will be a separate video, so check back for that. If you don't want to miss it, subscribe, and I will share that with you soon. And then we'll be back in a few weeks for another pregnancy update, let you know how this baby is doing and how our birth preparations are coming along. Thanks so much for joining us, and we will see you soon. Bye.